Hello, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today for the July US Web Design System call. I'm Maya Benari, sorry, a product manager and front-end designer on the US Web Design System team. I'm joined today by Dan Williams, my teammate on the team, who's the product owner and designer, and will let himself introduce him later on. So real quick, a couple of things before we get started. We'll take questions at the end of the presentation, and you can type those into the live chat box at any time. The chat box is located below the video and to the right, and you will need to be signed into a Google account to use it. If you need captions, we have a link that was emailed to you and also hopefully posted in the chat box. And we are recording today's session, and it will be available immediately on the DigitalGov YouTube channel. You'll also receive an email right after the event with the slides and event evaluation. Please give us your feedback since it helps us make these presentations really worthwhile for you. So I'd like to give a little bit of context for today's event. So we host these monthly calls sort of as conversations with fellow designers and developers across the government. We typically invite folks from all around government to kind of share their work and experiences and kind of how they're working with the web design system. But today we're really excited to sort of turn the tables and share a little bit of our own work on the system with a preview of version 2.0 of the US Web Design System. So without further ado, I think we can go ahead and start the presentation. Right, so we are the Web Design System, or the US Web Design System, and we have, we're just going to talk to you today about version 2.0 and sort of what's coming up. And as sort of, you know, what we've been doing previously, we had, you know, our first initial public release in the summer of 2015, and that was a 0.8 release. So it was a few years back. And we released version 1.0 in, you know, last winter in 2017. So it's been a little more than a year since we've been above the 1. And so far, so the reach of this has been pretty amazing. So we've had basically 950 million users on web design system based sites. We've had more than 7 billion page views on these sites in some way using the web design system. We've had, since 1.0, more than 475 closed issues in the web design system repos. And skipping ahead a little bit, Dan. But, so we've heard a few issues, though, in this time, these past few years of what's sort of, you know, been happening to people trying to use the system. So, you know, I tried to use it and add on my existing site, but everything broke. We've heard that. You know, we've heard, I like the constraints of the system. You know, I'm not a designer, but I also like to be able to tinker a little bit. We've also heard, you know, I should be designing experience, not fussing over pixels. And what about templates? We have a couple of them. And new components. So right here is just like a quick listing of something that Dan Moll had made in a previous article of his, of sort of like, what are all of the components out there? And he really looked at a few different design systems and kind of added all of the components that folks have had through that. So it's kind of interesting to see the context of that. And so where do we stand in all of this? So we have about 20 of those, and that's, you know, that's not a lot. And, you know, we don't want to expand to fill the universe of components, but, you know, are there other ones that, you know, our users and you all here on the call are needing and using that we should be expanding into? So here's what we need. We need to accommodate a broader range of government projects. The web design system can and should be a solution for any government project out there. And we need to bring back more solutions from all of your projects here back into the system. And so we need your help to kind of do this to help make the system even better. And we need a system essentially to help us design the future of what the system is. And we want to be able to grow smarter, faster, and more consistently.
This is Dan, and hopefully you can hear me. And now we're sort of approaching the release of version 2.0, and this is a release that will be ready to go this summer. And our overarching design principle for this release is built to grow. But what does that mean to us? It means we want to encourage modular, iterative design. We want to develop consistent elements of style we can apply to any component or design decision. We want to design with flexibility and consistency. We want to give ourselves the practical, creative constraints that result in good design decisions that are internally consistent. And we want all these decisions to feed back into dependable guidance that anyone can follow. And we want to be able to do this, all of this stuff, quickly and iteratively, prototyping and testing as we go along. So we can grow quickly but thoughtfully and consistently to give ourselves and any user of the system a reliable foundation for growth. This is the homepage of DigitalGov. And if you have an existing legacy site, you've probably been in a situation like the one I'll describe. You want to begin to incorporate the design system, but it's tough to add it iteratively and incrementally. Adding USWDS styles often affects existing styles and layouts in an unpredictable way. So with version 2, we want you to be able to add the design system to your site, and nothing happens until you want it to happen. So we're working to introduce isolated class-based styling to have a dependable system of styles that avoids styling unclassed elements. These kinds of styles often leak out into your existing site styles and make it difficult to incorporate the design system on an existing site. And we'll introduce a customizable base font size, so our M-based sizing will work on any site. Not just those that use 10 pixels as the base font size, but those that use any size, like 8 pixels or 12 pixels, or anything really. Even something unusual like 16 pixels. And one of the biggest things we'll be introducing in version 2.0 is standardized palettes. Because sometimes the scariest thing isn't always the blank page or the blank screen. It's choice. And that's the sort of sometimes near infinite continuum of values available to a digital designer. All kinds of values exist on a broad, complex continuum, like a supermarket aisle that stretches out to infinity. These are things like color, and spacing, and type scale, and line height, and shadow, and letter spacing. And those are just a few of the important continua of values we choose from to make design decisions, where even something as simple as a button can kind of explode into countless permutations of choice. So in version 2 of the system, we're working to convert these boundless continua into something more practical, something like palettes of discrete values. And I'll start with a practical, accessible color system. So we're introducing the idea of a project theme palette, similar to the colors that we already have. And in this palette, you'll see our familiar sort of reliable default colors, just organized a little differently. So in addition to primary and secondary colors, we're introducing a base or neutral family, as well as warm and cool accent colors in values from lightest to darkest. And this new system will be a more solid base for theming, sort of pointing to the way colors are used on a site. Our defaults are proven to work. They've worked on a lot of sites so far, and folks rely on them for good reason. But we're thinking about theming because we also know that the broad range of USWDS projects have different audiences. We've seen this. They've been built by different teams. They've been built by agencies with different missions, all with different messages they need to convey. And we can't necessarily be a one-size-fits-all solution and hope to accommodate these real user and mission needs. So what happens if our defaults aren't sufficient for your project needs and your user needs, and you want something that's not in our default palette? You're back to the continuum. Or sort of in the world of color, you're in something like this HSL color space. So that's why we've developed the design system's standard palette. It's sort of an advanced set of tools for when your project needs require a non-default solution. We've worked to quantize the HSL palette into discrete families, sort of based on the Roy G. Biv naming system, with warm and cool variants, all derived and interpolated from successful existing palettes in government and in the private sector. And there are also some vivid variants for these colors when a color needs particular impact. And since one of our core values is accessibility, these colors are designed to make accessible color contrast decisions easier with something we're calling the magic number. In the magic number system, each color gets a grade from 0 to 100, as in this scale, where pure white is 0 and pure black is 100. And here it is for the red color family. Oops. So with the magic number grade system, differences in grade of 40 or more result in section 508 AA large contrast. So if you're using something like red 20 text on top of a red 60 background, that is a combination that will achieve AA large. And we test it, and voila, AA large. And differences of 50 in magic number achieve section 508 AA contrast. So if we're putting something, if we're using red 20 over red 70, then that will achieve AA. And we see that it does. It checks out. Hooray! And this works across color families as well, like red 20 against indigo warm 70, or against mint cool 70, or against gold 70. And all the colors of the same grade have the same black values, so they appear similar in a grayscale environment. And that's the system standard color palette. And we're doing a similar kind of thing to standardize type scale and line height with regularized predictable type scale and line height. So one issue with typefaces is that they're all built differently. 72 pixels in one face can display much smaller or larger than 72 pixels in another face. And this affects usability, readability, and legibility. And it can make components built in one typeface prone to failure if that typeface changes. So we're introducing a smart scale for type sizes that work regardless of the typeface. So now a typeface spec'd at small size will reliably appear at that size in a small face like Source Sans Pro, or in a large one like Merriweather, or any other sort of type family that you choose. And this works with line height as well. And we're introducing 6 standard line heights that will work with any typeface. That could result in something like a baseline grid. That baseline grid will work and be the same size whether or not you're using Source or Merriweather or Roboto or something else. And this type scale has a 9-step project theme scale, sort of from 3 extra large to 3 extra small. And these values are customizable, and they can be chosen from a larger standard scale that's 21 steps. And we derived this 21-step standard scale from analyzing sites that have used the web design system and looking at what they use, going through best practices for legibility at different device sizes, and built a scale that we think you can reliably use for any project. And this has support for non-default typefaces, like system fonts. If there's a good reason for you to build your site with system fonts, you can use our sizes and our guidance and know that the components we build will also perform with system fonts. And we're also introducing a new open source typeface called United Sans as a sans serif experiment. This is a fork of Libre Franklin, the open license Franklin that we've modified to achieve a few very specific goals that I won't get into right now. But needless to say, this is something that we were beginning to make available as an experiment. And now I'm going to pass it back to Maya to talk about some of the other things that we've got going on in version 2.
Hello again. So yeah, I'm here. I just want to talk a little bit about sort of the spacing units that we're kind of introducing in the system. So this controls anything from, margins to the size of things and the height and width. And this is sort of about regularizing and getting a lot more consistency with the space between things. So it's built on an 8-pixel base. And here's just a sampling of like what that would look like. So you have sort of that single unit, which is the 8 pixels, and then you multiply that by 2 to get 16 and 24, and so on. And that sort of gives you this very even and consistent scale of things, much like music has a scale from notes that help get those consistent. The space between things should help in building interfaces as well. And so we've also included more values where it counts. So from 1 pixels to 20 pixels. And essentially, if you go down and cut the 8-pixel base in half, also you get the 4 pixel to the 2 pixels to the 1. And then here's just a little bit of what that looks like from 1 to 20 and where those intervals kind of step in. And this gives us a lot more reliability for centering things. So for example, when you start from an 8 pixels to growing to a 16 pixels to a 24 pixels, you're always going to be centered in the middle. We also have clear and predictable breakpoints. So for example, here from mobile to tablet to desktop to widescreen, you have a lot of just very clear and consistent and reliable breakpoints at those media queries. So this is developed to work well on any US Web Design Systems website. And the next thing I wanted to talk about is sort of this new grid system that we're bringing into the system and for you all. So it is a 12-column grid system. So this should look familiar to most, and a lot of grid systems out there are based on this kind of layout. And the way we're kind of thinking about it now is sort of being more declarative and more, more practical in a way. So we are using sort of Flexbox for this. So if you'll notice in one of the first examples above, where we have the grid call class, that will help fill the available space using Flexbox. And then below that, we have a very declarative style of just declaring how many spans or how many columns in that you want to declare, and also some offsets as well. So again, it's based on Flexbox. It's flexible, very similar to what you'll see in a Bootstrap 4 or in a Foundation, one of their newer grid systems. It's responsive and mobile first. So the first kind of grid column that you're declaring is going to give you that mobile and up. And in this example, we're declaring sort of the tablet would have 6 columns, and everything above a tablet would have that.
And also everything below that would start at 12 columns.
Yes, so that's a little bit of functionality that we've built in. So the only thing you have to worry about is sort of how many columns you want at sort of that larger sizes, and everything below that will be taken care of for you. But if you want to override that, you're more than welcome to, just by using the regular grid column class. So if you want sort of a different breakpoint at desktop, at widescreen, this is sort of how you do it. So next, I kind of want to talk a little bit about really the functionality, the new functionality we're bringing through integrated variables, functions, and mixins to you all. So we have some very powerful SAS maps and customizable project settings. So there's a lot of power being built into the system, and the idea is for each project that you have, you sort of can customize them to, customize your theme to any way you need to fit your specific project. So we have modular, mobile first, and atomic utility classes. So these are single purpose, very focused classes to kind of put in the hands of you all to kind of help you achieve what you're after. So this is just an example of that, margin utility. It's very, single purpose, very focused. You would just be, declaring margin 1, and that gives you that sort of 8-pixel base again, and then 2, and this is a little bit how it looks like. So it is optimized for legibility and comprehension. And a lot of other systems out there will be very sparse and very brief, but through our testing and really showing this to people, we found there was quite a value with making things a little bit more obvious. So it might be a little bit longer to type, but hopefully we've seen that it helps people comprehend a bit more what's actually going on. So this is just a few examples of what that sort of looks like, those new utility classes. So they are also responsive. So I kind of touched a little bit on that in the grid section. So for example, you can turn these on if you want. So the mobile large, if you want a smaller font, or on desktop if you want a max width to be activated, you can do that through these responsive settings. So now we want to talk a little bit about sort of the scope and how these things are set. So hover is another one. So it's not just responsive, but if you need a hover state, a focus state to have a little bit of a different style or color, you can do that in very much the same way. And also we have some optional customizable namespacing as well. So a big thing about this new release is that we want things to be customizable for however you need it. So in our utility classes, we do not really namespace them. So traditionally, if you're familiar with the previous CSS, is the USA prefix. And for these utilities, we've opted by default not to attach any namespace, but that's all a setting. So if you actually want to add that in, you can very easily add that right back in case you're working with other libraries and you want to ensure that you don't have any kind of conflicts with them. And we have some custom output. So if you don't want sort of the pin left, utility, and you don't want the sort of desktop style for maxed width, you can just turn that off. So you can really, fine tune and customize what you actually want to output. And that goes for colors and different styles as well. You can add important to all of them to make sure, to be really sure that those override other styles as well. Turn it on, you can turn it off. And then we want to talk a little bit about mix-ins as well.
Yeah, so mix-ins are another aspect of the path from writing something in atomic styles into component CSS. So we've been working to make a pathway in that direction. So if you have something built in atomic CSS and you want to move it over into component CSS, there's a relatively simple pathway with the same kind of way of writing these things as a mix-in as well. So with a little bit of copying, pasting, and find replacing, it's you can turn something that's written with atomic utilities into component CSS. Sorry to jump on that, Maya, and back to you.
Yeah, so a lot of people want to know, how big is this? This is great. We have a lot of features, but is this going to weigh down my site? Well, it's only around 25 kilobytes gzipped, so it's actually quite small. But yeah, you can modify that as you need as well. You can turn things off, turn things on. And so now, yeah, things are included by default. Everything's there, but you can output it a la carte or not at all. And now I'm going to pass it back to Dan to talk about the system.
All right. So this is something that we're thinking of as really of an integrated design system. We're not really introducing any new components, but we're introducing all new components in that we're sort of changing the way those components are built. And because we're not adding any new components or changing the markup of those components, your existing markup will still work. In general, what we're doing with version 2.0 is developing powerful tools to build new functionality and new guidance. We're providing strong sort of creative constraints for ourselves to build new things that are internally consistent and consistent between components and between potentially different sites that are built using the system. We really think of what we're doing for version 2.0 as a platform for the future of the web design system. And in a somewhat ambitious but really realistic way, the sets of things that we are creating for version 2.0, 2.0 in a way like contains all of what we will be building in the future of the web design system. So that's pretty exciting. In general, what we're doing is trying to set the foundation for ourselves to build with thoughtfulness and consistency and to grow the system as we know we need to grow. And we're pretty excited about all of these things. There's a lot of stuff coming, and there's a lot that we know that we can do with this. So version 2 is the beginning of a lot of new stuff and a lot of new capability with the US web design system. And we are counting on being able to not sort of go it alone as we go forward. We really count on the community of folks who are building things with the system to continue to experiment with it and to build new things with it. And in the future, we can be better about incorporating those things back into the system. We feel like what we're doing with version 2.0 is beginning to establish some of the internal rules that we recommend for how to build things with the system so that we can begin to build a pathway from things that are built outside to things that are being built, to things that we distribute in the system. And so we're beginning right now to launch this new URL that is the beginning of the documentation of this version 2. So it's v2.designsystem.digital.gov. And you can go there right now. You can begin to read the documentation for a lot of the things, especially for the things like utilities, which we've put a lot of time into, but are still very much in progress. So you can visit V2 to check out that documentation. You can go to our GitHub repo to see what we're doing and follow along with the issues. You can use this link also to download a package of the new design system and check it out. Stress test it. Complain about it. Post new issues. Rave about it. We want to hear what is working and what isn't working. We won't be able to necessarily make every change, but we are working to make a system that works for you and works for us and is a really exciting thing for the future. And that's version 2, and that is the end of my slide deck. I'm going to exit that.
Yeah, and
come on back to Earth here.
Yeah, we're back on planet Earth, and would love to take a few of your questions. And like I mentioned at the top, we have that little chat module, which is below the video to the right, and we would love to for folks to kind of to say hi there and ask any questions. So starting off, we have a question from Jeremy, and he asks, "Are you using web fonts?"
Yes. The system uses web fonts. It already uses web fonts in the current version. We use Source Sans and Merriweather pretty extensively, and those are all used as web fonts, and we will continue to use web fonts as well, knowing that web fonts don't always work, they aren't always the right solution, and that things that we build with the system have to work well whether the fonts load or not. That's sometimes the case, sometimes not the case. Sometimes things break when the web font is broken, but we use them now and we'll continue to use them. That said, the things we're doing with Typescale will help if, for your particular use, you decide to use something like system fonts.
Great. So we have another question from Micah. Micah asks, are there any open source or other design systems that you're taking particular inspiration from for this effort?
I think it's clear that we take a lot of inspiration from something like Bootstrap 4. A lot of what, that's a little bit, maybe it's more of a framework, but there's a lot of what we're doing to kind of infill framework mentality into our design system. And a lot of that we are taking from something like Bootstrap 4. We've also been inspired by Tailwind as a system for generating utility class systems. And of course, there are all kinds of other design systems that we sort of know and love that we're looking at all the time to see what they're doing, and to be inspired and to try to see what our potential future paths are.
Yeah, I'll also add we've been inspired by Tachyons, which is another utility system based CSS as well. That's been influential to the work that we've been doing. And then just there are amazing other government design systems from Australia to Gov UK that we take a lot of inspiration from, and just other ones in industry as well. We're watching. So
the CMS design system, I think we've said in the past, like we've been looking at what they're doing and trying to.
A design system based on our design system, which we're then influenced by, so it kind of cycles. So we have another question, which is this is awesome from Aaron. Thanks, Aaron. Can we beta it now, or do we have to wait? You do not have to wait, Aaron. You can go right now to v2.designsystem.digital.gov and go take a look, try it out. You'll probably want to click on a link that says utilities there at the top and to see everything there. And then you can kind of just go and download the source code. It's in the V2 branch if you're on GitHub, or actually it's a different branch that's for the doc site. It's release-2.0 on the main repo. So feel free to check that out and let us know what you think.
That said, the documentation is clearly not yet complete, and there's a lot of power in the new system that comes from project settings and customizing, and we haven't fully written out the documentation for how you do that exactly, but that is on the way. And also feel free to engage with us in our public Slack channel or via GitHub when you have questions about what you find.
We have a question from Myron or Miran, who asks, what was the reasoning for choosing Flexbox over CSS Grid? So yeah, that's a great question. I will say that CSS Grid layout that's come out is a really amazing tool for doing layout in a very kind of two-dimensional way. So if you want sort of a magazine style to have kind of your blocks in a very kind of not just the horizontal but the vertical positioning, it's wonderful for that. Flexbox is a great tool for doing things in a more kind of single directional way. And for us, a lot of people that we talked to really cared about just things working a little bit more automatically out of the box. So having it fill space, which Flexbox, flexes, and it does that amazingly, which CSS Grid at this time does not. So we're still looking, though. We're still open to consider, what's out there, and you all will also know like what is the best tool for your project as well. So that's just the particular tool that we chose for the kinds of layouts that we're working with.
We're curious to see how CSS Grid grows and matures. Like, it's maturing really quickly, but we're very confident in what we can do with Flex, and we're confident with the constraints that it puts on us.
Yes. Another question from Aaron, who asks, is there an upgrade strategy for users going from version 1? Government isn't always quick to upgrade to the latest tech, so how do you plan on supporting V1 users?
I think the biggest thing is that we will be working on documentation that's more thorough about what the changes that we've made from version 1 to version 2. So that kind of that should help know what you might need to do with your own site, if anything, to change. Another answer is that, to a large extent, we're hopeful that you might not have to change too much of anything, because we aren't changing the markup, and because we're kind of leaving some existing functionality in. Our hope is to get to a point where, if you upgraded to the newest style sheets, they could apply to existing markup. There might be a little bit of moving around as it locks into some different spacing scale, but in general, the site should still perform as it did before. But that is important to us. We know that that there are a lot of changes, and that's part of our next push, is documenting those changes so that folks know what changes and what they might need to update, if anything, on their own site.
Yeah. Let's see. Luis really liked that tool you have for checking the color contrast. What was that, Dan?
That was Colorable, Jackson Black's Colorable.
Awesome.
It's one of those things that's spelled without vowels, so I can't remember just what the URL is. But if you look up Colorable.
Yeah. Gigi just asked, you said version 2 is due out this summer. Can you give us a ballpark official release date, knowing, of course, that it's not set in stone?
Personally, our internal goal is the end of August, which essentially means for us 4 sprints.
Yeah, I would also add, what's the last day of summer? So we might need the time, especially as we get.
Yeah, so we're building natural flexibility in.
Yeah, so we have Vets Affairs is letting us know that the download link on the new site isn't working, and yes, it's still in alpha technically, so that won't work. But I encourage you to go to the GitHub and get everything there. Maybe we can make sure that link is working for you all. But yeah, things are still moving, just to let you know.
Yeah, and I think a good strategy at this point, as we're moving forward, if you aren't already in our USWDS Slack and you're able to be in our Slack, you should consider joining, because that, in addition to GitHub, is a really direct way to get our attention. And I don't remember the URL off the top of my head, but we'll get it for you.
I do. It's chat.18f.gov, and that was.
That's why I rely on you, Maya.
Yeah, that's why I'm here. So yeah, that was a question also we had from somebody in the channel too. So yeah, go to chat.18f.gov and feel free to select the Web Design System channel, and we'd be happy to chat with you over there. See if there are any more questions that we have time for.
We will eventually share the slide deck as well, sometime soon. Not quite sure how, but we're going to work to do it.
Yeah. Somebody asked what agencies are already planning to use V2, and thanks the Department of Vets for shouting out that they are working on a new site that will be using 2.0. So if any of you are out there that would like to try it, let us know, and we'd love to see how it's going for you.
I know that one of my next goals is, as the slide indicated earlier in the presentation, that the attempt is to get it onto DigitalGov. It's a personal project for the near future.
Yeah. And I think that seems to be most of the questions that we have there. Anybody else wants to squeeze in another one? Or Dan, are you going to say something?
I was just going to say that I'm so happy that everyone was able to come in on, you know, sort of a weird vacation week and come hear what we're doing. We are going to have another one of these monthly calls in August that we haven't entirely figured out what the focus is, but I think we're going to try to do a little bit more of a deep dive into one topic or another. Possibly your feedback in GitHub and in the channel will influence what we're talking about. But we know we want to get a little bit deeper into just how to work with the system in the new version.
Yeah, and also this is the first time we've been using YouTube Live, and so it's a new experience for us, but let us know how it was for you. There will be a feedback survey at the end of this, and would you like it to continue being here, or did you like Zoom better? We'd love to know how this feels for you all.
And one part of it being on YouTube Live is that it will be available on YouTube momentarily. After the recording finishes, it's only a matter of time before that persistent YouTube link will appear, and anyone who didn't see what we presented today could follow a link and see it at their convenience.
Yeah. And we also just had a question a little bit about actually like who's working on the site and team structure. So I'm sort of the product manager and front-end design developer. Sorry if we didn't explain this in the beginning. Dan, do you want to introduce what you do?
Sure. I'm the product owner, which mostly means I juggle the like vision stuff, but I also do a bunch of front-end design and visual design. And we also have a new core team member, Adam Biagianti, who just started, who will be focusing more on the engineering side and the JavaScript stuff as we tidy up this release and we work on some new things for the future.
Yeah, and then of course all of you all who have been contributing and using it, yeah, and different people throughout the government, we rely on you all. So it's a small but mighty team, but I think we do the job, or we try. So I think that's it for questions, but I just want to say, yeah, thank you all for attending the event. If you have any outstanding questions, please send them to our team and we will follow up. Our email is USWDS@gsa.gov. And as you can see, the DigitalGov team just put a link to the event valuation in the YouTube chat box. Please take the time to give us your feedback about today's event. And we'll also send the evaluation via email with these slides and video and other relevant resources. So thanks again, everybody, for joining us. And we hope you have a great day and weekend.
Thank
Bye.
you.